Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Circle of the World podcast, where we discuss Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. I am one of your hosts, Lord Chamberlain Jeffrey, and here are my co-hosts.
Archlector George.
And Harrison, the Adeptus Historical.
Today, we'll be interviewing the Bloody Niner from the First Law subreddit on this episode. So, let's get started. The Bloody Niner, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Why not?
Much appreciated, Lord Chancellor Jeffrey. How are you all doing today? I'm glad to be here. A little bit about myself, I guess. I'm a longtime Abercrombie fan. Have been reading the series, since they started coming out. What was it, like mid 2000s, right? Like,
Dang, I think
it's
you're the first guest on here who's been reading it since that time.
Like, I picked up, I think,
George.
right? Yeah, like the Blade itself came out in 06, I think, and I had picked it up and started reading in 07, and so kind of been following it along the whole way, and really passionate about fantasy and sci-fi, so have read a lot, and I feel like Joe Abercrombie is like at the top of the pack, or if he's your 1A or 1B, like there's not a lot of separation between him and the best other authors in the genre right now. So it's just really exciting to see what you guys are doing with this pod, and what the subreddit's blowing up as, and just having more people get involved in that community, and a lot of speculation as to where this series is going and what can we see next. And I think that's what intrigues me the most about it. So I'm happy to be on to talk about it.
Well,
hell yeah.
Because I really like the fact that this, especially the Age of Madness, just ends on so many different cliffhangers. And you just don't know where. And it gives us so much, unlike the end of the first trilogy, where it's sort of like set up as very much an ending.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think anybody is oblivious to this fact, but this is a spoilers conversation, right? If we're getting into this and like what's going to be coming next, we're probably going to be talking about what's going back. So like caution, spoilers, right?
Yeah,
like,
there's going to be spoiler warnings all over this description.
Right. So to me, it really stands out when you look at like the way the series has been broken up with the first trilogy, and then the standalones, and then the Age of Madness trilogy, and then obviously like throw Sharp Ends in there as well, is that Joe did a really good job with that first trilogy of, by the time you finished Last Argument of Kings, what you were expecting to happen, right? Like kindly old wizard Baez is like leading, the Fellowship of the Useless Rock over to Shadowland to pick up the stone, right? And nothing ever happens, and they come back, and then you get to Last Argument of Kings, and you realize like Baez is a fucking psycho, and like he just destroyed half of his city. Like, this is not what I expected at all. Like, Gandalf wouldn't have done that shit, right?
And so hashtag not my Gandalf.
Right. And it kind of turns like it on your head, right? You're like, oh, crazy. So really he's just a spiteful egomaniac who's like in this war with another, spiteful egomaniac who like created an entire army of cannibals. Okay, cool. And that ends. You're like, what the fuck? So you come out of that and you get into the standalones, and I really love what Joe did with them, right? Well, he broke them down thematically, but he also, like, Best Served Cold is, all right, now we're going to look at Styria, and we're going to see a different side of the map that we haven't really dove into yet, and introduce some new players, right? You get Shanked, you get like other people who then also really don't like Baez, right? And they're maneuvering and trying to get things into, out of that, like, that bipartisan, like, political control of whatever's going on the map, right, between Khalul and Baez. And so you introduce like that other element, which is really cool. I think it adds some color to it, and some different levels where it's not just, Baez versus Khalul.
Do you think that Shanked and Monza actually are a threat to Baez in reality? I mean, obviously Shanked is powerful as fuck, but do you think they're actually just in the way or an actual threat to his power?
I think they're in the way. I think they're not a threat to his power because I don't think they have the same motivations, right? I feel like with Shanked, and like what you see from him and where it comes out, is he doesn't care about taking over. He just doesn't want Baez or Khalul to be in control, right? He just wants to rip control from them. So they've kind of taken that piece off the chessboard for both sides, right? At the end of Best Served Cold, it's like, all right, now we're in control of Styria, so you don't get to use this in your power struggles anymore. And then you go into the heroes, and obviously that's more of Ishri's involved on behalf of Khalul, and Baez is pushing the Union and the Dogman side, right, to try and take back over the North. And so that's that same age-old struggle that you've seen there, but it's a really wicked in-depth dive into it, right? And like getting down into the grittiness. And I think the Heroes is like one of the best fantasy books I've ever read. Just from like the level of detail he goes in, and like the casualties chapter.
Yeah,
for example.
and this was when he starts doing it as well in
right, exactly.
in the Heroes. And I always thought, what would these be like if they were in the first few books? If they were in before they're hanged, especially when
like what if
I love the bit when the mercenaries or the old Empire guys are like coming after Pharaoh and Logan on the hill.
Yeah, that would have been good.
I would love one of those chapters from that point of view.
Right. I was thinking that, and then also like the Bloody Nine chapter at the end of Blade itself. Like, what if you had some of the people that were chasing them like through the scaffolding of the contest, grandstands and all that kind of stuff, like just something like that. But it didn't happen until the Heroes, and whatever, that is what it is. But that chapter, I think right there was like one of those paradigm shifts for me. And like reading a book, I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. Like dude's running up the hill, gets hit in the face with an axe. Another guy shoots an arrow, then he's getting speared, and it just keeps bouncing back and forth. Like, so cool. But the underlying
little people chapters.
Yeah, like the little people chapters, exactly. And I think when you're looking at the way that plays out, right? The way that the Heroes plays out, it's still telling the same story. It's still telling Baez trying to be in control of everything, Khalul's trying to fight back against him, and everybody getting caught up in that and like their individual character stories of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then when we go to Red Country, slower pace, awesome, like Western, spaghetti Western, old school style. I love that book too. And yeah, like Clint Eastwood, like Unforgiven, that kind of thing, right? And I know you guys talked about that with recently as well. And it's such a cool premise, but then also the underlying background, it's still, the Union is trying to go out and expand, but now instead of it being Ishri or Khalul that they're fighting against, you kind of have this weird, like, old empire is getting solidified under Zacharis and Conio, and they're now a player, right? So then they're not really threatening Baez to take control of anything, right? But they're just
that might be different though, right? They might actually be trying to take over.
No,
they might, right?
Yeah, at that point in time, what you're talking about, if you're talking about Red Country, it's almost like the aftermath of like after Zacharis backed that guy, and before the hanged, I forget the guy's name. One of the sons. They say, he killed his brother,
Sarmis or something like that.
Yeah, some shit like that. And what I do like, from what you were saying earlier, from the original trilogy over to Best of Cold, is I feel like it's something we probably should like look at, is in the sense of like, okay, you could say the North or the center, right? It's Baez, right?
Yeah.
At some point, that's Baez's place. Khalul's in the South, and then you have Zacharis on the West with Conil, and we don't. It seems like Zacharis is the lead magi there, but we don't really know. But we also know that Conil's like handling the Great Western Library, which is basically just the Grand Central Hotel from Deadwood, if anyone knows what that is. Anyway, but then in the East, there's really not much anything. There's nothing there. There's not anything there. But you have Shank there. Now, what I always thought was interesting, right? Baez always thought, like, in the lead up in the whole original trilogy, the only kind of person that wasn't an actual quote unquote magi, right? One of the original 12 magi that he actually has, like, I got to worry about this person is Mamoon, right? He mentioned Wind and those damn twin bitches or whoever the fuck you're talking about. I don't know.
Right. Those twin bitches.
Right.
Damn those
like the top 5 of the 100 words or whatever.
Right, whatever. Yeah. Top 5 dead or alive. All right, Jadakiss, chill out. So anyway, my point is like, how much power does Shank really have if he's not quote unquote a magi? And this is probably the pedantic side
high
of me,
art.
which just like the pedantic side of me is like, well, Shanked is not technically a magi, so why should Baez even like worry? He should just be able to send. Holy fuck! I'm dropping the ball in his name.
Sulfur.
Sulfur, thank you, Yoru
Yeah.
Sulfur, and just handle his ass.
So
But
no, I agree. On as a
so
1v1.
So that's for me. I guess I'm just like, this seems like a lot more complicated than what we initially thought. Like, if that was the case, right? If you had out of 12 magi, only one is refusing to follow the line that Baez, was talking like, oh shit, yo, Candidius killed Juven's son.
Candidius.
Right? And then you had, and then Khalul's like, this motherfucker's lying. And then, like, really, but like, that's such a buffer that, like, what happened to the other magi? Like, obviously, we know at least 2 died when they tried to invade the House of the Maker. What happened to the other, what, 9 or 8 or whatever the fuck you want to call it? And like, only 2 are in the West that we know about. Then there's Baez. Sulfur, as we know, is an apprentice. So what happened to everybody else? So I just think like, I know there's something behind there. There's something more.
It'd be interesting to learn about that as we move forward.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, and see, I think that's something it's different about Joe than a lot of other fantasy authors that spend a lot of time on exposition and like world building, right? Because if you think about the difference of like a page count of like a George R. R. Martin book or a Robert Jordan or like Brandon Sanderson book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not really into those, but I think a lot of people will understand what I'm talking about. Like, man, those are like 750, 800, 900 page books where Joe's really aren't, right? His are more in that 500 to 600 ish range.
Mm-hmm.
So they're adding a couple extra 100 pages and they'll get into that shit. They'll talk about, like, oh, 300 years ago, so-and-so like fell off the face of the earth or something, right? Like, they'll talk about it, but he doesn't. And so there's some mystery in there. And that's why I kind of like the pacing of how he does it and how he unravels those things. Cause like you just said, is Shank really a threat? Is he or isn't he? Like, can't Sulfur just take him out? I don't know. Sulfur kind of backed down when he saw that it was Shank the last time when they were, in a little conversation there in Best Served Cold. So I don't think that it's like a 1v1 style threat because Baez is trickier than that, right? Like, he controls the banks, he gets rid of the guilds, like he does all those things to set up the institutions for him to be in control. And Shank takes that off the board with Monza in Best Served Cold. And then when you're looking at like that Zacharias and whether Corneil's pulling strings from the Western Library or Zacharias is really just the front man, or maybe they're whatever, tag teaming it, whatever. But he's putting the old empire back together. And through Red Country, you see that where, Pike is very adamant about it. Like, hey, Casca, you're taking the gracious hand out there, but absolutely under no circumstances do you engage with the old empire, because I don't think at that point like Baez and Zacharias aren't really against each other, because he's still kind of like feeding him that line of bullshit about Candidius and Juvens and how it went down. And Zacharias hasn't come out and said, fuck me, you're lying yet.
It's kind of like a situation where kind of what you're saying is that the different people in between from different aspects all together, they create a much bigger threat than by themselves. So like you said, Monza and Shank's real threat is that you can't push them around, and they're not controlled by the bank. They're independent entirely, which makes them a thorn in the side. Then you have in the West, they're probably a military and magic threat because there's 2 of them. He can't fight both of them. He doesn't want to fight both of them, and he just wants the old empire to stay in the past. And now they're starting to come up. And then as we see, Union breaks away from him and all that. Yeah, throw it to Baez. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And so that's kind of. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, by the end of Red Country, right? We kind of see there's other players in the game, right? It's not just Baez and Khalul. Like, there's really other powers out there. Countries are controlled by other people, so it's not just this like one side versus the other side anymore. There's some more dynamics that you have to consider, and whether they're allies or enemies or just abstaining from the fight, it's not just as clear as what you thought after the First Law trilogy, which is, Baez and Khalul have this like century long war going on between them. Oh, that's some crazy shit. Let's see what happens next.
Mm-hmm.
The standalones like show you, oh, there's more layers of this onion we're peeling back, right? There's some other stuff going on.
Right.
And then I think Age of Madness comes in and just, obviously from a bias perspective for everybody that's gotten through Age of Madness, like he's not holding many cards at the end of it, right? Like,
well,
you kind of get.
George, what do you think about that? Do you think that Baez is?
I think Baez is one of these people, isn't he? He's always got a contingency plan, and even though it seems like he's lost control, I think he will find a way to wear himself back in, because especially with the banks, like he was smart enough to get all the money out of the banks and not actually keep money in the banks. But I think he does have like significant amounts of like influence and capital in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So
he
I think
definitely
it is
still
quite
does,
interesting.
yeah.
But he also we've got this thing with Cleft Lip and Hildy as well.
Right. Hildy Dan Valent or Dan Balk, whichever one you want to call it.
Hildy Dan Balk.
Hildy Dan Valenbalk, okay? This is a modern day, okay? She can be both, all right, boys?
It's hyphenated.
Yeah, it's hyphenated. I'm a strong, independent woman.
Harrison, you gotta figure yourself out because Oklahoma don't exist, so you need to like work on your own.
Yeah, I'm also 55 years old, okay? So fuck off.
Wait,
I'm
you're
your elder.
55? I thought that
That's
was
right.
me.
That's right.
That's great.
No, Jeff, you're an AI.
Oh fuck! Oh, that's right. I'm an AI. Right.
You're
right.
so sentient that you forgot.
I thought I was on
It's
so
the tip of the
old.
iceberg.
I have Alzheimer's. That's what I thought it was. Anyway.
Shout out to Sir Spaceman for an awesome meme on that one.
That one was hilarious.
That was great. I want to ask. So, like, all right. I don't understand. I don't know if this is a writing issue, or maybe just he meant it to be this way. But like the fact that like Baez let the ball drop in so many ways, right? And if you're thinking about it, right, considering prior to the blade itself, he had not visited the Union in how long? 200 years, give or take, right?
Like that, yeah.
Something like that, right? So he doesn't visit the Union 200 years, but as soon as he kind of like even gets in the periphery of it, he knows who to infiltrate, who to bribe, where he has to assert his own dominance, right? Versus, if you're following the timeline of the books, the published books, 28, 30 years later, Baez just kind of like, hey, Glockner, you take it all on. And then Baez and Sulfur are like, hey, what the fuck happened, man? Like, how did you do this? It's like they all put their own eggs in one basket, and it felt wrong. It felt weird. Like, that's the main problem that I have the Age of Madness trilogy. When I'm reading it, I'm like, from what we've known from the previous 6 books, right? This don't fit with what we know of Baez. So it's either, and I hate to say this, and I'm gonna keep it in this episode so people can curse me out on social media, on whatever you want. But I'm just gonna say it feels like Abercrombie's trying to force in a political statement of some sort. Just I'm gonna be vague on that sense because I don't know where it's coming
he was
from.
asked that question, Jeffrey?
Oh,
in an
was he?
interview.
Well, I need you to tell me about that later. But I'm just telling you right now because I'm flying blind, baby. I'm flying blind. I'm flying blind. My point is like you read it and you're like, it makes no sense. Honestly, it just makes no sense in terms of the continuity of like the storyline. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand that Glockta will try to like break away. It makes total sense that like Glockta would like create an insurrection with chimney sweep kids. Insurrection with chimney sweeps. Oi, governor, I want to sweep this chimney. Oh no, I'm dying. Oh wow, big deal, kid. Anyway,
that is such a raw chapter.
I know. Oh my god, when I read that, I was like, ooh, that's rough. Anyway, but no chimney sweeps who listen to podcasts. Anyway, but the point is like, it didn't fit. Like the Baez that we know that we look like this dude had like the only reason that he was like left out of like you could say quote unquote he dropped the ball prior to the original trilogy was that he was in the Great Northern Library for 200 years or so. it's only been 30 years. For him, it's like a blink of an eye. He should not be so how do I say this? Not ignorant, but just so like
Incompetent.
incompetent. Yeah, he just seems incompetent. And I feel like my personal opinion is that I guess because of the political atmosphere of current times, Abercrombie might have kind of like hoodwinked that or forced that in here.
It would be a fucking boring ass story though if Baez was in charge the whole time, though, right?
Wait,
It'd be
repeat that,
boring. I was saying what?
Repeat what you were saying.
I was just saying that it'd be super boring if by the end Baez is like, aha, I'm still in charge because I'm unbeatable. Like, he's got to mess up somewhere. He's got to make a mistake somewhere for there to be a story. You know, when it comes down to it.
True.
So,
and
like,
go ahead, George.
And counter that as well, Jeff. We don't know the extent of what Glocktor was doing,
or Giselle.
Like we don't know everything that he got up to. We don't know if he sabotaged certain things in other ways so that Baez wouldn't be able to intervene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He might have been working with Corneal and Zacharias and Monza, all of them.
Ooh, spicy! I like that.
So, and that's a really interesting take, and where the future goes is going to be really cool. I think one thing that a take that I have on it, because I don't disagree with you, Jeffrey, on like it's because of the political nature in the real world. The story did seem skewed a little bit, but I think what Abercrombie said in an interview was that he was already writing the story before all the shit started getting really weird, and it just happened to line up, right? And obviously, Age of Madness is mirrored off of like the French Revolution, so he's taking that, right? But one of the things that sticks out to me is, you know, during Age of Madness, Euro is kind of the front man, right? Sulfur's the front man for Baez's interests within the Union. He's running around doing a lot because where is Baez? He's in the West dealing with some, you know, whatever they say, troublesome issues or some things going on in the West, right? So what that tells me is coming out of Red Country and what Zacharias and Corneal are doing, like solidifying the Old Empire, is like they're actually becoming more powerful and more of a threat that 15 years later, right, he's having to pay more attention and probably play nice with them because, you know, if they come to power, like that's a lot bigger threat now that Pharaoh may or may not have offed Khalul and Mamun and everybody else down there. Like maybe she's running rampant, just killing all, like maybe they're all dead. We don't know for sure, right? But that's speculation.
Mamun is dead.
Mamun is dead, right.
That motherfucker's gone. He gone.
But you're right. But the Prophet, right? So the Prophet and Khalul. So who's the biggest threat then in Baez's? And you got to remember, he might be a master manipulator. He's very good at walking into a room and knowing like how to read people and what to do. But he's also an egotistical prick. Like he thinks he's the smartest dude in the room every time, right?
He kind of is,
so
isn't he?
Narcissist.
He is. I'm not
saying,
saying he's not, but he he believes it more than is cautionarily like advisable, right? Because now in his mind, his biggest threat is Zacharias and Corneal, more than likely. I'm just assuming, right? He doesn't think that his boy Glocka that he put into play is going to betray him and like rip out the Union from underneath him. But it is also a blink in the eye for him. So the whole like Clef Lip Calder's son and Hildy Van Valent and Balk, like that's his next play. And it doesn't matter for him if that's 10 years down the road or 15 years down the road or 30 years down the road. Because he's been in charge of the shit for hundreds of years. Like it's a speed bump. I'm going to come back, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good thought for to think about that aspect. That the reason that he fails is because his eye is not on Union. He made the Union, as everyone says, on purpose to counteract Khalul's empire building. And with Khalul gone, he wants to make sure the Union's fine. But I don't like, as George always points out, whether he's an either or not, Baez is checked out at this point in Age of Madness. Not because he doesn't care about being in power, but because he thinks, okay, Khalul is gone. What's the point of the Union? Fuck it. I don't care if it goes down. It's too big to die anyways. It's all good. And then he's in the West dealing with that issue.
Yeah, but I don't think he thinks it's not. I don't know if I agree. I don't know if Baez thinks. Baez, all right.
Stressed out, bro.
No. I'm trying to put into proper terms. Real quick, I know George hasn't seen it. I know Harrison has seen it. Bloody Niner. Have you seen Deadwood?
I have watched some of it. I haven't watched it enough to get like every reference, but
Season 3, George Hurst, that's Baez. Honestly, guys, in season 3, you're like, oh, that's the American version of Baez, where it doesn't make any kind of sense to try to run things, but that's what Baez does. He can't help himself. He has to be able to be in charge and bend people to their will, right? That's what Baez does. Through, I mean, come on, for fuck's sake, the guy, he's out here jerking off to, master maker arts or whatever the fuck it is, and then and then Logan comes and says, "Oh, this guy speaks to spirits. I get the Pharaoh who's can carry the seed and all this stuff." Baez is like all kinds of like, how do I explain this? What's the word? Power hungry.
right.
It's crazy power hungry. Like, if you think about it, it's not explicitly stated, but it's pretty obvious that he killed Juvens. Come on, guys. He killed Juvens.
Baez did no wrong.
What did you just say? He did no wrong?
So I think that
I don't know if he actually killed Juvens.
This motherfucker done. First of all, you can't be on this guy's side if he. No,
Jeffrey,
I'm not done. He killed his teacher. We know he killed his teacher, and then he killed the dad of the girl he was shagging. But before he killed him, he killed her first.
Yeah, he's a
piece of shit. He's a piece of shit. Fuck him.
So,
Fuck him.
I agree completely, and I think it seems out of character for him to drop the ball that way because he is so power hungry and he wants to control.
Exactly. That's where I struggle. That's where I struggle so much with this.
And I think he totally underestimated Glatka as a player and also overestimated his ability to rely on Glatka, right? Like, I think that he just looked at Glatka as like another guy that he's got in control for a little while. You think back, like, whether you believe that Shanked is King Casimir Dan Shanked or not, which I do. I don't, if other people don't, like, whatever it is, but come on, man.
He totally is.
There's enough breadcrumbs there that you got to fucking pick it up, right? You got to realize that that's what it is. But when you think about the story of how that happened, right? And Scarling Hoodless like had united the North, probably with the backing of Khalul at the time. I mean, if you're just reading into things how they go. So Scarling Hoodless unites the North and he's coming to fight, and King Casimir and the Union goes to war and they win Angland, and then they get to the White Flow, right? And what does Baez want to do in Heroes? He wants to keep pushing. He wants to keep fighting. He wants to go another day. And Casimir doesn't kneel, and he says, "Fuck you, we're turning back. We're not doing this. We're not going to keep fighting this stupid war." And that's kind of that falling out. So it's not that Baez has underestimated or, thought that he had power over people in the past more than what he actually did. And it turns into, now you have Shanked in control of Stereo with Monza because fuck Baez.
Right.
So because I think like this is another snapshot in time of one of those things, but by all means, it is not the end of Baez. Like, this dude's crazy smart and powerful.
And that's what frustrates me. Go ahead. What were you gonna say, Harrison? I'm sorry.
You're good. I just was gonna say Baez makes mistakes. He is a human being. He shows remorse for mistakes he's made. Obviously, him killing Juvens on purpose or an accident, he did not. I don't think he wanted to do that. I don't think he wanted that to be the angle. I think he regrets that decision. I think he regrets killing Ptolemy, clearly, even if it was to cover up a lie. I think he has plenty of regrets. And so this is just one of his mistakes, is that he thought that he had won, that it was all over. And now he's reinvigorated. Now he has a purpose again, regain control of the Union.
And I think, go ahead, Drew.
Absolutely. And these plans that he's putting forward, and especially the dream that Rika has, that kind of like we pretty much confirmed that Baez is going to be able to sort of industrialize the North, because you sort of see like the bands of steel wrapping it up and things like that, and I think he's definitely going to bounce back in a way that I'd like to see Baez become like the big bad in the next trilogy, especially.
George, don't you think he was already the big bad? Because
No, I mean
he's
like
always been
officially.
Yeah, like he's
Like I'm
he's
talking
like,
about
I
full
am in
on
charge.
Dark Lord. Yeah, like that.
without being tricked, like, oh, Khalul's the big bad in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Just because the way, like, the vision from Ricky, whatever the fuck,
Ricka.
Ricky.
Ricky.
What the fuck? Abercrombie, get you and Pacey's like pronunciation. Get it together, guys. Get it together. Anyway, like the way it was in the book on paper, it seemed like even though we like Glock admitted that he's the Weaver, in thematic elements in the terms of like themes, it seems like Baez is the Weaver and he just needed time to like get things together. I'm really having a hard time buying that the fact that like okay, Baez only I'm saying no, I'm not done. All I'm saying is like the fact that this guy really depended on one dude, Sulfur, right? Whereas in the original trilogy, you saw these hints where Baez like the tendrils of his influence like crept up. Severard betrayed Glockta, Malthus, other people that like just snitched, and they were being like these how do I explain it? The spies for Baez, and then like what he meets Glockta and he thinks, oh, because Glockta's disabled, he can't take 2 steps without taking the piss on himself.
Oh, that's what this is about, Jeffrey.
You know what I mean? Like I'm like he knows better. He should know better, and I feel like that's where, if I had to say, and I love Abercrombie as an author. I fucking love him. First of all, because the guy, he actually completes books. He says, "Oh, I'm gonna finish the series. I'm gonna finish it," and he does it. Oh, unlike another person that I know from New Jersey, Martin. Anyway, he does it. So I can't fault him for that. But like, I feel that's why I say like the things like I said, like, oh, I feel like he got conflated with modernist political times versus, you know what I mean, like what he was originally set out to write.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That's just the theory, a Jeffrey theory.
Oh fuck! You know what? It's official, and I'll fight anybody that says it. Even Abercrombie, I'll fight his ass too. I seen pictures of him. I'll beat the shit out of him.
Grimdark's gonna pull out some sneaky shit on you, man. No, I think it's a valid. Anybody can criticize, right? Like, and it's valid to look at it that way.
Of course.
So, the long and the short of whether it was influenced by real world politics or not, is that when we get to Age of Madness and we get to the end and we're talking about Ricka's prophecy, like we can see like bad shit's coming in the future, right? Like Baez is going to come back with a vengeance like he always does. But right now, as far as political control over any nation, like he doesn't have it, right? It's gone. And so to me, that vision of the iron encircling the north and Hildy with gold just pouring out of her hat, or right, pouring out of her mouth, or it's Clifflip Calderson with blood pouring out, everything, like there's going to be
everything's
war,
pouring out.
There's going to be domination. Yeah, it's going to be freaking wild because Baez is going to bring back that iron grip. But what I feel like's happened, right, through Age of Madness and through the standalones up till now, is we've been introduced to all these other players. And it's not just this 1v1 Baez versus Khalul anymore. It's the world against him, right? Like there's going to be a bunch of other areas that do not want this guy to get back in control because they can see him for what he is, right? And that is where, when you're talking about the hopes and dreams for the future of the series, right, and like what we as fans want to see, is really where it gets interesting. Because I think you look at it like, if he follows the same game plan, right, and he does standalones in between, like a capstone trilogy, if you're thinking about like the Star Wars type of prequels, middle trilogy, and then the final trilogy, like, and I don't want it to go like the Star Wars one did. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like the way that it's set up structured wise. I think it would make a lot of sense, right? And I mean, everybody here is going to buy the 6 next books. right? If he does 3 standalones and another trilogy, like we're all buying it. Everybody's listening is going to buy it, like
Yeah.
for sure. So it makes sense from his standpoint if he can get into it and do that. And I know he's doing the Devils right now. And
Right.
for anybody, I would think that hasn't read The Shattered Sea, just because it's not First Law, I would say read it. Like it's YA and it's not as gritty, not as grim, not as dark, but it's so good. Like it is really good. So when his Devils books come out, I'm reading that shit for sure. Like I'm day one buying it. Like
Yeah, I'm such a slacker. I read the first one, Half a King, and I feel like I have the second and third books. I have not read them because I'm an asshole like that. But they're
No.
they're on the list because when I read the first one, Half a King, I was like, yeah, this is young adult only. Like they're tiptoeing on that line. You know
it's
what
like
I mean?
NC-17. It's
Yeah.
not like PG-13, right? It's like
close.
It's like not rated R, but right in the middle type of thing. Yeah. But it's really, really good. And so I think we're all like, we're here. There's podcasts about it. There's Reddit channels about it, right? There's fan art all over the place about First Law because that's what he's most known for. So we're all kind of waiting on, all right, well, if you're going to do like more standalones in another trilogy, what's that going to be about?
Oh, speaking of standalones,
Yeah.
Josh, what do you think the next standalone should focus on? Like, if they're going to be broken up thematically the same way?
I really hope so, and only because the way that he did that.
What kind of things would you like to see? Like settings or like different themes or anything like that?
Right. So if we look back, right, and you got Best Served Cold was kind of like a Count of Monte Cristo style revenge tale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then The Heroes was like a really deep dive into war, into battle. I mean, kind of like if you're thinking movies like, Saving Private Ryan, right? It's like a short stint of days, but like really intense. And then Red Country's obviously your spaghetti westerns. So he pulled that off like in each iteration so well. Like he did them really, really, really well in each one. And everyone has their preferences. I think, like we might all come up with different orders of the standalones and who likes which one better. For me, it's just kind of what mood I'm in, right? Like I think they're all great. Red Country's probably my favorite, obviously, because I'm a Logan fan / whatever you want to call Logan fans, right? Like he's not a good dude. He's an utter bastard. He's not a good person. I'm not saying I think he's a good person, but he's damn interesting to read, right?
Sure.
Of course.
So for the next standalones, yeah, exactly. I think that if he does the themes like that again, it would be awesome, but to twist it a little bit. And the one that really sticks out to me, that there's a lot of meat on the bone that I think he could run with first, would be like a horror take.
Oh,
and
yeah.
If you look at the Sharp End story, Hell, that follows Temple when the Eaters are coming for Kadia, right? And he's running through, and it's just expand that idea and keep it in Gurkel, because what do we have going on in Gurkel right now? Right. We got crazy ass Pharaoh running around murdering all these Eaters, right? And they're just like the whole society's burning down.
Yeah, but at that time, it's the Goska when Glokta, quote unquote, left, and like it's all like, it's all collapsing. What would be
exactly
cool? What would be cool? And I don't, obviously we don't know the inner city political structure of stuff, but like imagine if there was more than one person of a similar station of Temple, right? But they're in different buildings. But at certain points during the siege of the Goska, they're getting taken out.
Yeah. And so
I think then the lead up is up to Hadish
Kadia. Yeah.
Hadish Kadia. Like there's like a build up to that. That would be crazy. That would be nuts.
I think like that's the kind of theme that I think he could play with. I just think doing it where they're at in the story, as far as like at Age of Madness, and you could even, for me, it would make a lot of sense because of Rabik and Harun, right? When Zuri, who is Ishri, obviously, right? She's Ishri. When she's getting her brothers and sisters out, right? And Savine thinks like, oh, this is really her brother and sister. Yeah, no bullshit. They're just Eaters, right? They're other Eaters, and we know this because they chewed Sulfur's face off, which that was an awesome scene too.
Right.
So if he could spin up that kind of horror theme with what's going on at the end of Age of Madness, or even kind of running parallel before Rabiq and Haroon get out, and then maybe continuing a little bit past it, that's such a cool setting, and we know what's going down. We know that Pharaoh is just running around murking these eaters right now, and like we hear it from this yellow-eyed demon, and make her be the big bad, and put it in the like points of view of like a couple of the eaters just trying to get out, and then maybe some of the religious people, like you're talking about, like Temple, who's an acolyte, and the entire society is kind of getting all out of control. One thing that sticks out for that, though, that I know Joe has said before, is like he doesn't want to screw up writing about a culture that he's not super familiar with.
Well, yeah, but this is just fanfic, though. Yeah.
Right. So that like what if scenario, right? Like he says he doesn't really want to do that, but I think that short story Hell that was about Temple during, before they are hanged, and that whole like lead up after Glotka leaves, like he did that really well. I think he could do that bigger.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a great setting for a standalone.
I think that's brilliant. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we've all talked about the horror aspect. It's like a genre he hasn't done before. But what would be book 2 then? Because that would have to be pretty soon if he did it in chronological order, since Pharaoh. Yeah. You can't be super far in the future that's going on. But so what would you think about book 2? Like maybe an old Empire setting, Starkland setting, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think playing off of where we end at Age of Madness, and like the powers that are in the world that would be, pushing Baez to do the things that he does in Ricky's final prophecy, where we have the I am returned moment with whoever that is, right? Whether it's Glustrad or Uez or, who knows? We'll see. But I think Old Empire would be like the next one. And maybe it's, 4, 5, 6 years or so after Age of Madness. But we get to see more of what's been solidified with Zacharias and Conio, like putting together their plan and rebuilding that nation. But then also, Far Country is disputed land. Like it's not claimed by either side.
Oh, it's Union land.
Right. Well,
no. It's the Empire's land.
Listen.
Right.
So don't you dare say that.
So that's what I'm thinking, right? Is you could play on that and think of all the characters that we know of over there now that he could bring back and sprinkle in. Like if you're talking Red Country is what, 692, right? Or 592, whatever, in universe timeline, right? It's like 15 years before Age of Madness, right? Somewhere around there. Right. So like if you got Roe and Pitt, who are like what, 6 and 8, 6 and 10 at the time, and now they're in their 20s.
Bitches.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So like you could have Roe and Pitt, and then you also had Conthus, who was the leader of the rebels. Like maybe they roll up, maybe they'll go into the rebellion, and now you've got the rebellion in the Far Country fighting against a weakened Starkland, and it's kind of like it could be like thematically kind of like the Patriot, right? Or where you have
like a freedom fighter.
Like freedom fighters, guerrilla warfare, where it's coming at it from the rebel side that have the backing of Zacharias and the Old Empire, and they're taking back that whole continent, right? Like this is all part of the Old Empire now. And so you see it from like, you got the big Union redcoat style armies coming over, right? Because, okay, we don't want to lose Starkland. We're already kind of on shaky ground here.
Hashtag Starkland is the new America.
Right. And then you
make Starkland great again.
You got, well, you could have all of those people, and Temple and Shai could be there as like the same kind of Vitari style character that we saw in Age of Madness, right? Like not a main one, tertiary character, but still has influence, right, in the background, kind of playing like a Glotka style role. But that would be a really cool setup, and you could do a lot of cool things with like guerrilla warfare fighters. You got a bunch of like people with a bunch of slogans tattooed on their arms, and they're going to battle against the big armies, but they're doing like gunpowder IEDs and shit like that. Like who knows, right? That would be a cool one.
Gunpowder IEDs, it'd be so cool.
Well, I mean, like you think about that happened in like Age of Madness, like that charge that Leo had like right into the cannons, like that scene is like, well, shit, technology's kind of advanced a little bit here. And I don't think he'll ever, because he said he's not going to go into flintlock mode, right? He's not going to take it there. and I don't really care if he does. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not a preference, but I think that would just be a real cool setting because there's definitely meat on that bone too, right? Like, what the hell's going on over here? You've referenced it in Age of Madness multiple times. Baez was over in the West dealing with what's going on. All right, what's going on? Like, show us. And that would be a really cool, standalone as well. Bringing that one in for a second one. And I'm, if you're like 5, 6, 7 years after Age of Madness, then you're progressing it a little bit further, and you're getting to where Hildy and Cleflip are getting older too. And then so you can start seeing like the North has got trains now or something, right? Like you can start hearing about those things as that plan that was in Ricky's vision is starting to unfold. And I think that would be a cool setup.
I like that. I'd also like to see for a third standalone sort of be like a like you say, we get like Ayers or Glustrod, whoever it is, comes back, and we get like the full on fantasy war between like demons and all the powers that be.
Well,
I think Joe would be really interested in writing
that. I do as well, and I think we don't know his mind, right? We don't know where he's going with it, but I feel like if he follows the standalone book and then a final trilogy, we probably don't see the full on like I have returned moment until that final trilogy.
Yeah.
Right. And so
like a cliffhanger, right? Right. And so like if the first standalone, if he goes a horde path and like dives into Gurkle, it'd be so awesome. Everybody, I think we'd all enjoy it. And then if you're doing like a Patriot style where the heroes was like deep dive into like that really intense battle scene, and now you take it out and you make it like a guerrilla warfare scene. Yeah, like that would be pretty legit because that's a different take on that theme, right? It's still like warfare and battle, but it's a different take, and he'll do it well because he does everything well. I think
it's less of a All Quiet on the Western Front and more of a, like you say, the Patriot, and
right.
Be interesting.
Like just running around, Boston Tea Party these bitches in Rustad or something, like going like right into their base and doing crazy shit like that. You could play with so many things there.
I think one of the big things that we've been lacking since the end of Glocter's POV and the end of The Last Document of Kings, we haven't had a lot of like Inquisition style stuff. I know Vic does quite a bit from like the spy aspect of it, but I'd really like to see a mystery, like a proper mystery.
Yeah. Maybe no, actually, hang on. I'm gonna jump in real quick here, boys. Building on what you're saying, George, and what you said, Josh, that third book could be like maybe that person's already returned, and somebody is trying to figure out what's going on. Why are these deaths happening? And they're having to like travel and try to figure out, get some Easter egg characters, and it's more focused on only a few characters, maybe less of a big cast, focused really hard on their character, but trying to figure out maybe they're a little crazy, maybe there is something out there, and at the end you get that reveal that whoever it is has returned. I don't know, something like that.
Dun 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 dun.
I like it.
No, that would be really. I mean, that's the interesting take, right? Where I think everybody, when you finish Age of Madness and it's like Ricky's prophecy, she's sitting there like obviously freaked out about it, and then Isern's asking her, he's like, "Hey, is everything okay?" "Yeah, we're all good. We're all good." And that we're not all good, right? And so everybody's wondering like, who the hell is this? So I think that is going to be such a cool reveal that I hope pays off. And honestly, here's the thing too. If he left it at where it is right now, like it's still a cool ending. I just want more because I'm a greedy asshole and I want more, right? Like that's what it is.
We all are.
I do think one untapped resource that he could do from a theme standpoint for a standalone other than a mystery, because Vic, if you remember, Vic went off to the far country, right? Like she left. So she could be involved in that second standalone somehow of like, intel gathering, that kind of thing, which would be cool. But he hasn't done a lot of stuff with Thousand Isles, Thond, Soljuk, that whole area, and pirates, which would be kind of dope. Like if you did a pirate theme where now you have you've got the Styria contingent maybe is getting a little bit chippy with the Thousand Islands because they've got some pirates out there, and obviously like Orso's
you can have Joppo be the main. Have Joppo be the main. Yeah.
Exactly. So Joppo's the main. What I was going to say is like original Duke Orso, right? Like he had the Navy that came to rescue Adua at the end of Last Argument of Kings, right? And so like their Navy is supposed to be pretty damn good, right? So you've got that Navy going against the pirates, and I'm not talking like campy Pirates of the Caribbean steam. Like obviously, no. I mean, grimdark, like that, but grimdark. So you've got like the pirates coming in, and Joppo is the main guy trying to fight back against who are these pirates. And when I was thinking about this originally, it was one of those magi, Carnault, sailed off into the horizon, and that was it. Like that's all that's said about him. Like Carnault left, he pieced out, he sailed off. So maybe he sails back, and it's like a red herring of the I Am Returned, right? It's not really him. But he comes back, and he's got this little pirate nation that he's leading and trying to take some stuff back. And maybe
I love for him to be super weird too.
Yeah, just be like Tosca only Magi style, maybe. I don't know, but because
he does, he just blows people up all the time.
Joe does like recycle those, like if you think of like Broad is like great value brand Logan type thing or whatever,
don't do that don't do that to my man.
I actually, okay, that is something that I see on the sub a lot, like people hating on Broad. I don't like
Broad sucks.
Yeah,
fuck Broad.
I don't hate him either.
He has his place in the story.
Fuck him.
Yeah, so like to each their own, right? Like you don't have to like him. But I think what would be really interesting is if we have like if he does like a pirate theme or gets something like that involved, and Carnault maybe comes back, maybe he's on Baez's side. Maybe Baez somehow gets him to come back. He's like, hey brother, I need some help here. And he brings him back in. And so then that is the like a conflict that we could see play out between Styria and Shanked and how that's going, which would set up like a final trilogy where you have Old Empire run by Zacharis and Conneal, who's got a lot of power. You've got Pharaoh, who is like total full-on Magi demon eater killer, like just going around. She doesn't really like Baez either, right? It's not like they're buddies. Like she's not a fan of him. So like she's also got some beef with Baez. But then you've got Shanked on the other side, and Glotka and Leo and Savine and their kids, and how that plays out there in the Union. But then also Rika and her contingent up in the north, right? Like there's gonna be there's comeuppance heading her way, right? That's what her prophecy is about. Like the north is going back under Cleft Lip Calderson here is what that prophecy kind of hints at. And so you get into that final trilogy where it's not just like that 1v1 like we saw in the first Law trilogy. This is for all the fucking marbles now, guys. Like the world is at this now, and we're all coming together. And then that creates some kind of little screw up by Baez where he's trying to do that magic like he did in Adua, where he perfected Glustrod's spell. He's not going to blow up Adua like Glustrod did Alcus. Quote unquote perfected, right? Yeah, and then it opens the gate to hell.
Right, but it took different layers. It took, Juvens, Badesh, Canadias, and Glustrod. Like how he told the blacksmiths, like, what was it? He told them to insert the. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not so easy peasy lemon squeezy, man. It's just not.
No, it's not.
For sure.
You fuck it up.
For sure.
So that's I think that's in my opinion, right? That's the I Am Returned. It's like, so either the deck is stacked against Baez that he does something drastic, or he thinks he's smarter than he is, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to open the gates. I'm going to bring back a demon to do this for me. I'll just wipe the fucking floor with all of you. And then once you unleash that, right, you're not putting that genie back in the bottle. You open that up, magic has returned, because that's what Joe's kind of hinted at in interviews, right? Is like a return to the magic, right? And so if that happens, now you got like the whole circle of the world is in a world of shit at that point, right? And how do we recover from this, and where do we go, and what is that last trilogy going to look like? Well, all right. I mean, we've seen a little bit of that prophecy, but then I think it's just like a fast-paced roller coaster of you got all these different sides coming together that if you got to take, like, if it's Uez that returned, like, that's not a one-man fight there. That's like everybody's got to be in on that, or they just get wiped out.
So, Josh, I think that what Joe should do is probably hire you to plan it out, since you clearly have thought a lot about this and you know exactly what should happen. And I 100% agree. This is a great idea. Now I'm going to be disappointed if this doesn't happen. Damn it, Josh.
You know, that's the problem. That's the problem.
You spoiled it.
Have, like when you've got people that have been reading the series for 15 years or whatever, and been along with it, like y'all have and I have, is like you start thinking about these things. So I have these expectations, but you know what? If he goes a different route, it's still going to be good. I'm still going to like it.
That's what I'm talking about, Josh. That's the right attitude to have. That's right.
Yeah. Well, and
better attitude than me.
Dude, Jeffrey, you mentioned it earlier, though, right? It's like the whole Martin thing. And so, like, I started reading Martin in 96, like when that shit came out. So all those waits, the 5-year waits in between book 3 and, 5 or 4, and then the 6-year wait, and now the 11-year wait after that. It's like, come on, dog. I kind of want to see how I want to see how bad HBO really fucked up your vision. That's what it is. I want to see where you were really going to take this, because, you know, that's just part of it.
Yeah, let's not get into Let's not get into the Song of Ice and Fire. Josh,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you have any thoughts to round off the discussion that you want to leave the audience with? I think that you've shared an absolute fuck ton of really cool predictions that I really hope happen now. But is there anything else you want to leave off with?
So I think it could be like a whole other hour if we really dove into it. But everybody also asked the question about adaptations, right? Like the film, the anime, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. All I gotta say is I hope so, and I hope. I'm giving a shout out to the anime. If anything happens animated style, it's gonna have the sharp ends be anime. Have those stories be anime. It would be like awesome. Just having anime shorts.
Oh, okay.
Shad and Jarvan there.
Okay. Sharp ends anime. I can see that.
Yeah, but the rest of them, I think it would be really cool if you had a series for the first trilogy, and then you could do standalone. You could do like 1-season series for the standalones, or you could do longer movies, because they're set up more like movies anyway. The standalones are, right? Yeah. And then another series for Age of Madness. That's how I would do it, like live action. But obviously, like, you got to go with the HBO. You got to go with somebody like that has the production quality to do it.
That's our show, everyone. We want to thank you all for listening and supporting this podcast. As you all know, this is a passion project for the three of us, and your support really does mean a lot to us.
Join us next week as we do another special guest episode with Stephanie, who is going to be covering the female characters through Best Served Cold.
And as always, guys, remember to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Reddit, we have our own websites, circleoftheworld.com. So go and check it out.
And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any podcast app that you use to listen to podcasts on. And please make sure to rate and review this podcast, as it helps to spread our reach. Thank you all again for listening.
And remember, folks, it's better to do it than live with the fear of it.